All right, welcome back, everybody. This is the Becoming an Institution Level Cyber Infrastructure Leader workshop. It is Wednesday, August 6th, 2025, and we are on our second panel. This is Strategic Thinking and Visioning, and our moderator is Eric Dumans of University of Florida. I'm going to turn the show over to Eric to introduce the rest of the panel. Go ahead, Eric.
All right. Yes. I'm Eric Dermes. I'm Director of Research Computing at University of Florida. I'm also a faculty member in physics and chemistry. I do computational chemistry and computational nuclear physics. But in the last decade, I've been the Director for Research Computing, managing resources and fighting the federal government with their requirements on compliance. So let me introduce, I start with uh, following the boxes on my screen, Craig Stewart.
Hi, I am retired from full-time work at Indiana University. I retain a position as adjunct professor of computer science. And what retired from full-time work really means is that I get to do whatever I please. Formerly, I was the executive director of the Pervasive Technology Institute at Indiana University, and really participated uh, in Indiana University moving from why are you people at the supercomputing conference in 1996 to being part of Exceed and now Access. So it'll be fun to chat with everybody today.
Next one is Stephen Deans.
Hey everyone, I'm Stephen Deems. I'm at the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center based out of Carnegie Mellon University. I've worked mainly in some of these national scale programs that Craig just mentioned. The one that takes up a lot of my time now is the Access program. I also work with a lot of institutions in our region, southwestern Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, as well as assist in some projects across various departments at Carnegie Mellon. So thank you all for having me today.
Next one is Evan Lemley. Uh, we don't, we cannot hear you, Levin. Nope. Well, while you're trying to figure that out, let's go to the next one, Dan Marshak.
Dan Myshak, I'm Director of Research Advanced Computing Services at University of Oregon. I've been here about 3 years. Before that, I was at University of South Florida for about 20 years.
All right, next one is Craig Pohl.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Craig Pohl, Director of the Research Infrastructure Services at Washington University in St. Louis. It's part of Central IT. I've been at the university since 1997 and have had multiple roles starting out on the Human Genome Project and kind of working my way up to director of that program and moved it over to Central IT in 1997.
All right, Evan Lemley, are you able to
Is
say
this
something?
better?
Yeah, oh yeah, now that
Okay,
works.
good. I was on the wrong mic. I'm in my browser running today, and that doesn't always work well. Hi, Evan Limley from the University of Central Oklahoma. I'm currently the interim dean of the College of Math and Science here, and simultaneously the director of our High Performance Computing Center. We're a predominantly undergraduate institution with in the College of Math and Science departments in engineering and chemistry and computer science and software engineering. And so that's the source of a lot of our research computing on campus. I'm also faculty in engineering and mechanical engineering, and yeah, that's about it.
All right, so our panel today is focused on strategic thinking and visioning. And so I'm going to start with some lead questions, but if the audience have any questions, please put them in chat, and then I'll try to call them out. So the first one is to the team, the panelists. if you were to consider your leadership approach, what percentage would you say was reactive, responsive, and how much is proactive or entrepreneurial? How important is it to drive change to be successful? So, and I would like every panel member to give a little comment. So we'll start, Craig.
So this is a question that has a time-dependent answer. When I was first leading a group of 26 people responsible for research computing and high-performance computing at IU in the mid-90s, a very large fraction of my time was reactive. And it was really tough to fit in strategic, longer-term work. As time went on and as I was able to hire more people and better people, people who knew their areas better than I did, that allowed me much, much more time for strategic thinking and grant pursuit and entrepreneurial work. And I will say that in some sense, writing a grant proposal is a reaction to the existence of an RFP, but it is very much strategic, because if you're going to write a proposal, it's going to win and be funded. What you are going to do is propose something that is forward-looking, entrepreneurial in some way, and strategic and helpful in the long run. That's it for me.
All right, next, Stephen.
Yeah, I want to go off the Craig's mention of time. I would probably say my balance is the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time I'm reacting to things that are going on. I'm working on so many different projects with different stakeholders. And I really think in order to drive more time to be able to do entrepreneurial things, you need to manage your own time well. One of the things that I've always taken pride of in my work and what I offer is my responsiveness to stakeholders. Even if it's just, I heard you, don't have time for this right now, but I'm working on it. I tend to think if you stay on top of your communications, you will eventually have time for entrepreneurial aspects of your job. But if you can never dig out of the never-ending cascade of emails and Slack messages and action items resulting from meetings, you will never get time to think and act entrepreneurial. As I've seen some of the questions that are going to be asked in this panel, and a lot of this does relate to some of the nature of funding. So I won't spoil any of those answers now, but I really do think folks in a strategic role have to balance way too many things at once, but it does come back to them to make their own time available to think about how to build on these connections and think a little bit forward into the future.
Evan.
Yeah, I had in my notes the time dependency factor as well. And I think back to when we started our high performance computing center, which was, I think, 2012 for the first time without a cluster at that point in time. And also running our college IT, that we were very reactive. That was about all. But then as we began to apply for NSF MRIs and other opportunities, we certainly were attempting to be more strategic, and I think at some point were. But until, I guess I've always had some sort of hybrid role also, where, like probably many of us, where faculty, part-time administrator, researcher. So it's, too many things. And even now, as I've come into the dean position, it's the same way. But fortunately, we've been able to build up some positions, some staff that have been able to loosen up time a little bit to be more and more strategic over time in general. So I was thinking, as I guess Craig was talking, that it seems like there was kind of a turning point for us, maybe coincidentally, maybe not, around COVID, where we were doing a cluster rebuild at the same time, using some Exceed resources to help with that, by the way. And we really, and that was at the same time we were adding a full-time position. And so that really changed the game for us.
Next, Dan.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody else has said, I would probably put out two other points. One is when you're driving change, you have to make sure that it's reasonable for the institution that you're at and not driving it for the sake of driving it. On the other hand, from just a personal standpoint, I find driving change adds to my self-satisfaction with my job as opposed to just, you know, you get caught up in the day-to-day answering emails, doing all that kind of stuff. And that eventually, at least for me, got kind of old. And being able to add new things and drive change kept the job fresh.
Craig Pohl.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of what everybody said, managing your time is important, but as a leader, it's also teaching other people how to manage their time. I think back when I first started, you just showed up to work and you just wrote some software. But then quickly as I got into management, it was, well, I didn't want to be on call if somebody in my team broke software, so let's implement tests. And then when I got, into management over systems, it's like monitoring, being proactive. And it's really helping other people to think about, well, if you don't want to fight fires, well, think ahead, prioritize your work. And so I really did that through, defining standard processes, standard documentation, demonstrating the value of mentorship and cross training within the teams, so that you don't have to fight fires, so that you can work on those larger strategic initiatives at your institution. But at the same time, we have to be agile and you have to do continuous development to address, the ever-changing technology and needs of researchers.
Yeah, so actually, I think the answers are really good. There's one element that I think if you want to drive change and really do strategic planning, that wasn't mentioned yet, and it's actually addressed in one of our other questions a little bit ahead, and that is, how do you communicate with campus leadership about research computing and data needs? And do you have a regular built-in mechanism? Because the point that I think is important, if you want to make a strategic plan, you have to have at least some buy-in of your administration. You cannot just do it on your own within an island. So let's go. And this time I'm going to start backwards. So I'm going to start with Craig Pohl.
All right, yeah. So that's a lot. That's a lot where I spend my time, or should be spending my time these days, and that's in governance, right? So formerly working with people in governance, we have two governance bodies. We have just general research oversight at WashU that includes all the VC for research, the deans and department chairs. And so they're much higher level. But then we have an infrastructure and application subcommittee that really focuses mostly on and that's the membership is researchers, and most of that is focused on our services that we provide, and really provide input to directions to the oversight committee. But then also informally, so lots of one-on-one meetings with those same people in governance to talk about like agendas, interests, and where people want to go. And then you have your, what I call my strategic partners, the people that, buy into our services, that are condo owners, and are big users making investments. So that's, kind of, both the formal and informal sort of mechanisms that I use to, you know, communicate with leadership. But then, then just general engagement. We host, and participate in other seminars and workshops and things like that too.
Dan.
Yeah, we have regular meetings with VPR, Provost, and CIO that I report up through. That is one of the big ways that we communicate with leadership. But we also, echoing what Craig said, a lot of communications on an individual level. So I think Craig covered it pretty well.
Okay, Evan.
Yeah, same. I report now to the provost, and so I've always had some reporting line up through the provost, and then to the CIO, from there. And then, of course, we have our sort of one-off meetings with our enterprise IT group, central IT group, as well, and then a lot of one-on-one meetings. Sometimes it's very important to know these folks well, and in our case, we're sort of a separate entity. We're not part of IT, enterprise IT and research computing. And so very important for lots of reasons to have good relationships there. So I have a lot of one-on-one meetings. Sometimes a lot can be done if I can get folks over to Starbucks in our university center to buy them coffee and have a conversation. So.
Stephen.
Yeah, so this has become a lot easier when a lot of our businesses front page news, with AI and data centers, where a lot more people are aware of what RCD professionals do. Um, to speak a little bit more locally, Carnegie Mellon University is a bit decentralized in on how they tackle research computing. They are currently taking strides to address this and try to make a more unified vision. So a lot of the PSC leadership is involved in those discussions, is assisting that. We're looking for areas where we already have complementary services where we can leverage other initiatives, other programs. But being one of the original national centers, we have so many connections that it's really even hard to keep track of at the leadership level, that we regularly keep tabs on past, present, and future collaborations and collaboration ideas. But a lot of what we do at CMU currently is on a departmental level, since we operate a lot of the cyber infrastructure for various departments, be it engineering, physics, robotics. So a lot of that comes from just conversations with them. And as we're noodling on an idea, we lean back to them and say, where do you see your field going? Where's the demand in your area? What are your grad students coming in with? What do they maybe not have that we can assist with? So it's not exactly unified yet, but we're currently surveying everything that we have and trying to coalesce it all together.
All right, Craig Stewart.
To maybe make a couple comments in the interstices of what people have already said. We always started with a strategic plan, and we always had it posted someplace that people could find it. And those plans always began by hanging the research computing plans onto university and state level plans. And whenever we entered a new phase of doing things, we generally put together an ad hoc faculty committee. So one-on-ones with faculty members are great. One of the challenges is that there are some faculty members out there who are perfectly happy to offer their opinion while also offering the opinion that the opinion you got from one of their colleagues is actually no good. So an ad hoc committee, I found, is better than a standing committee because you don't have to pay attention to them when you don't want to. On the other hand, when you do need to be able to say a group of faculty members who are all really bright and often disagree with each other, looked over these plans and gave them a thumb up, that can be really helpful. And then what we always did was annual reports that were structured against the strategic plan. And those again were put up in our digital repository as a rule, so that if anybody ever said, or I guess to be more clear, at various times when people told me that my head was someplace other than on my shoulders, I could point people both to the strategic plan and to the annual reports. And that didn't necessarily change everybody's opinion, but it was very effective in showing that we were demonstrating goodwill, following collective faculty opinion, and it was occasionally good in self-defense as well.
Yeah, actually, that is a very good point. In a lot of social dynamics, it is important to indicate that you listen to people. You don't always have to do what they say, but you have to indicate and be open to listening to them, make sure that you acknowledge and the rest of the world knows that you heard them. And then for whatever reason you decided to do something else, and then that is acceptable to most people, right? It's very rare that people will say, okay, I gave my opinion, you considered it, you have your reasons, that's fine, Now we move forward. So that's a very important part of the process, which is very different from just dictatorially saying, we're going to do this. I don't really care what you think. That is not a useful situation. So let's go to the next question, which is an interesting one. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? So people have already talked about being worried about funding. So this is something that comes a little bit around that. So what comes first? Can you talk about initiatives and program development and give some examples of where the funds or the FTEs came first, or the idea or the service of the solution was the impotence for growth, and then later you had to get the funds and the FTEs to support it. So now I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to start with Evan.
Okay, I thought you might do that. Sounds good. When I was thinking about this, we probably have examples of both chicken and egg, but in one case, when we got our first cluster, which was funded by the NSF MRI, I built into that some part-time operations support for a staff position. I can't remember what part of an FTE it was at this point, but which was an existing position, but we were able to justify carving off a little bit of that person's time to help with things. It took a long time, but that eventually did, really due to the growth that happened as a result of getting the cluster, getting more users, more use, and maturing, high performance computing on our campus. That did eventually turn into a full-time staff position.
All right, next, Stephen.
Yeah, I think we do a little bit of both. I think very recently we probably went the egg route, where PSC has historically been a cyber infrastructure provider to the national community. I've mentioned we do this on a departmental level. We do this for some other universities. Some of the other items in our toolkit are really revolve around education and training. A lot of the times on specific, whether it's Open ACC, whether it's Open MPI, very, historic HPC topics. What we're seeing now in the landscape is way more of the general workforce development. And in the RCD space, it's not just system administrators and network engineers. Like we need folks that even start going way more on the I would say the non-technical side of things in terms of project management, in terms of communication, in terms of data librarians. So as more and more initiatives are coming from sponsors around workforce development and making sure that they're equipped to work with AI tools, making sure they're familiar with topics like quantum computing. We've almost had no choice but to respond to a lot of these solicitations, go after as much budget as we can get to match what we can deliver. So we are oftentimes writing proposals on very, very thin budgets and promising to serve a relatively small amount of community members there. But after that's submitted, we're always thinking about how can we then grow that program. We already know what FTEs are going to come through if that grant hits. But while that's under review, we're constantly thinking about who else might be interested in this, whether it's our local government, state government, other agency sponsors, whether it's private industry. So a little bit, sometimes one initiative has both chicken and egg baked into it.
Next, Dan.
Yeah, I think that last statement that Stephen made was true, is that they kind of are simultaneous in some ways. Uh, you can't really go for funding unless you have a good idea to what you're getting the funding for. That becomes a give me more money because I'm a good person and doing good work. Um, so I think a lot of times they're both. I think what would be nice is to work with a staff that was big enough to try new things, to show that it was useful to the community around you, and then seek funding. Uh, I think a lot of times there's internal money because universities like to tell you that there's never any money and we're always broke. Uh, but if you can get enough of your community to actually say, hey, this is a really good idea, then you can you can take that as some seed funding and show that it works.
Craig Pohl, yes.
Yeah, it is a little bit of everything. So even the way that I basically started, my evolution of my group into central IT was really was just risk taking. I saw a problem at the institution. There was no really central computing facility, and it was going to be impeding, future research in clinical genomics and just collaborative research in general. And so I, started talking to the new CIO, and we already had a good relationship with the finance department at the med school, who were, key to basically helping move over. So I had a lot of ideas how I could help solve this problem, but not a lot of substance, I would say. But based upon past experience of running, a large research program like the McDonald's Genome Institute, I guess they put the trust in me, and working through governance, we kind of figured it out. And that's where, sort of the different approach kind of came in when there was real project proposals. I would stick in, sort of some FTEs to continue help, gain support for what we were already doing, essentially. Because, yeah, a lot of times you got to prove yourself that you can do it to continue to get that funding. So it's all about sort of risk management, continue risk management. And then when you get completely underwater, I submitted an S bar, and said, hey, I went to the finance people and said, hey, we're growing faster. We don't have enough money for the infrastructure. We don't have enough people to run it. Can you, I just need some, funding to come directly through me, not through some project mechanism. So yeah, so if worst comes to worst, you can always, go to other mechanisms like NESBAR or something.
Next, Craig Stewart.
Okay, let me share my screen if I may. This is a graphic. There we go. Does everybody see a
Yes,
circle?
we
Okay.
see a diagram. Yep.
Yep. Yep. So, it's an evolutionary process, and the thing is always you're always stuck starting wherever you are. For Indiana University, it was very much an evolutionary process where we won some very modest grant dollars, added facilities and staff, developed our competencies, and really ran this as a circle, uh, building up over time. And the first grant money that came in was MRI money and also some grants in kind from industry. And I think MRIs and CC Star awards are some of the greatest places you can start to build. Over time, we developed the chutzpah to apply to become part of what was then called the Terra Grid. And we all sort of thought, well, you got like an application, you've got to make a bunch of lights turn green. It can't be that hard. And boy, our first year as part of the Terra Grid, we learned otherwise. It was very, very difficult. Um, but thanks to collaboration and help, we were able to continue getting more and more grant awards, and really turn this circle pretty well up to and including Jetstream. One of the things that really helped us was getting some private foundation money from the Lilly Endowment, which is devoted to improving quality of life in Indiana. And they basically gave us money for grant hunting, for initial proofs of concept, hiring people to write grant proposals, hiring people to do early research that would lead to grant wins. And that was a real help. That's harder to get today than it once was. But I think the idea that several people have already mentioned, start with MRIs or CC stars, and just build your organizational competence as you go.
All
And now
right.
I'm going to try to
So,
quit
so
sharing here.
can I drop in one thing I
Yeah,
failed to
yeah,
mention, and
yeah.
also ask Craig a question on this. So we're seeing more and more that, especially some of the national funding agencies are asking for sustainability plans. And I've seen people literally say, what do you mean sustainability? We're gonna write this, we're gonna win this grant, and we're gonna come back whenever this is about to end, and we're gonna ask for another drop of money. And that has forced us to really think about who else can we partner with here, whether it's another institution or cross sector. Um, but I think that ties into this as well. And I guess, to Craig, like where would you see where would you insert the sustainability aspect into your loop?
Um, in some cases, it was proving to the university that they needed to pay for staff that had initially been paid for on grant money. In some cases, we actually had some marginally successful commercialization activities. I think I saw Julie Wernert's picture in here earlier. Her husband Eric developed a 3D Viz device that we commercialized, and we have made things sustainable. Um, I think over the time I was directly involved, mostly by uh, either phasing things out when they became unnecessary to focus on, or by getting some sort of other funding, consortium funding or university funding. There's the occasional, exceptional case. Protein Data Bank, once they were forced to ask for money out of the private sector, discovered that they could get money out of the private sector just fine. Those are rare, and writing a sustainability plan that doesn't really boil down to we're just going to keep asking the NSF for more money, and we'll ask for it in different ways and it'll all work. It's really tough to write a plan that doesn't boil down to that. It's a hard area.
No, no, for certain. It's like the grant proposal is I want the chicken, but in it I want to make sure that this chicken lays eggs along the way. And I think that's just one of the things you have to be thinking both ways, and you have to be intentional. I think this is one of those areas where it's hard to get by with a very hand wavy section for those types of requests nowadays.
It is. It is.
Yeah, and actually, there is a partnership that is necessary between your activities at the RCD level and the administration in the sense, and this is something that Preston Smith at Purdue, he did a PhD thesis on how do you prove the value, the return on investment of something like an RCD. And it's very important to paint that as a bigger picture and to get a partnership with your chief financial officer so that there is not the mentality at your institution that this infrastructure is just infrastructure and it's a cost that just needs to be recovered as much as possible. Now, you have to frame it, and that was Preston's thesis. You have to frame it as an investment, just like the Wall Street types, when they see something that is good and it has a large risk, but also a large potential return. That's what you go after. You don't say, oh, I want to make sure that every dollar that you spend on FTE or equipment gets recovered some way, because then you kill it. You have to be able to say, look, what is the mission of the university? The mission of the university is to educate students, to do research, enable your faculty to get grants, and then that is the real return. And now, what does it take for the university to put that infrastructure in place and put the staff? And then you start seeing a typical successful university will have hundreds of millions of dollars of research portfolio. And in order to operate an RCD operation costs a number of $1 million per year. So now you are talking about a factor that goes 50 to 100, and that is a return on investment that financial people will understand. This is worthwhile. If you're just trying to balance the sheet at the end of the year, you're going to kill it, right? It's if research was a profitable environment, there would be lots of companies in the United States and in the world that would just live off research. It's research costs, and the return is something that is in the future, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but it can be dramatic, as you can see, for instance, with AI. All the algorithms that are now so successful were all invented in the 80s. But it's only now, 40 years later, that all of a sudden there's like a $1 trillion business. Nvidia just became a $1 trillion company. Uh, so that's where you have to frame it in this bigger picture. It's very important. So the next question is, do you have a formal strategic planning process? If so, who is involved? What tools, if any, do you use to inform your strategic planning? For instance, all kinds of things. So I'm going to start with Craig Stewart.
Okay. So I talked about this a little bit. In terms of tools that we use to inform our strategic planning, back when the federal government would do things like put out plans for high performance networks and high performance computing, we paid real close attention to those, listening real carefully at CASC and CARC meetings, paying attention to what was going on at supercomputing and PERC. And I also used to go to the International Supercomputing Conference, which remains internationally always held in Germany, to get different perspectives, and then take the time to go to good quality NDAs with vendors. You can't do good strategic planning without knowing what the short-term roadmaps look like for equipment.
All right, next, Stephen.
Yeah, so at PSC, we're a pretty small shop, I think, relative to a lot of national centers. We're a staff of that hovers just around 70 pretty much continuously. And with that being said, everybody at PSC is involved in strategic planning in one way or another. Oftentimes, it starts at a group level. So whether it be systems, networking, business office, project management, having discussions within those groups about the current state of affairs, what may be lacking, what we may need to add on, or what directions we see things going. Like Craig mentioned, the technology roadmaps. A lot of it is driven at the leadership level, since I think a lot of us are paid to keep tabs on what's most current in our specific areas. But also our directors move, upward within the university, talk to the VPR offices, talk to the CTO offices. But as we go through our strategic planning process, a lot of the tools that we use are some of the standard elements, like a SWOT analysis, again, be it center-wide, group-specific, but also just regular small micro surveys along the way. And as we are moving forward, specific items in a plan that maybe haven't been in past versions, we always look to pilot those efforts first. So if we're staring at a long list of new things that people haven't seen before, we try to pick the ones that are most relevant to where our current needs are, build a team of the representative of the staff who's interested in contributing, moving it along, providing feedback. The thing you hear all the time is a strategic plan is a living document. I think in my 13 years at PSC, that has never been more true until this past year or so. But also, it's been really struggling for the word. I think it's been really cool to see staff come out of their way and say, how else can I get involved? I'm involved in these couple things, but how can I be at more of these meetings or help drive this further? So it's been pretty inspiring.
Next, Evan.
I know 70 might seem like a small shop. I can tell you of a smaller one. No, I think we're probably 3.5 FTE, and I don't know if I can count myself anymore. But nonetheless, you fit into where you are, right? And what the needs are here. And I would say one of the so I don't know that we have a very strong formal strategic planning process. But I do think that we do, try to stay in tune with what's going on. And really one of the primary ways we do that is fitting into our state needs and where we fit, in terms of an institution in the state and who we serve. And in large ways, that's through our One Oki collaboration and community. which is the One Oklahoma Cyber Infrastructure Initiative. That's a central figure is Dr. Neiman, who's our host here today. So that has really helped drive what we've done and inform how we fit in. And so that's been a big part of what we've done the last, I guess, 10, 12, 13 years. And I'm glad Stephen mentioned SWOT analysis. That is something we're looking at, but another grant I'm involved with, I've been hearing a lot from sort of turning SWOT into a little bit of a different acronym, OTSWA, which is opportunities, threats, strengths, and weaknesses. So really starting from the opportunity side of things and what our threats are as well, and going from there to match those with our strengths. And so that seems to be part of the cycle that Craig presented. Actually, if you look at the looking for the grant funding, as being in that mode of the cycle, and then you sort of process through after that.
Dan, next.
Yeah, we do have a formal strategic plan process, but it's within several layers. So the university just came out with a strategic plan, which then got handed down to central IT, which research computing is part of. And so we have, I skipped a level there. The university has one, the VP, the vice president for finance, who IS reports to, has one. Then IT has one, and we report up through all of those, and ours is part of that whole process. We also include our research faculty advisory committee as part of our process, so we take their input into where we're going and why we're going there. And finally, we also do have a statewide strategic plan that we're working on.
All right, Craig Pohl.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have the governance, which helps define strategy. That was all just kind of rebooted in the last year, so sort of re-architecting all of our governance domains. They all have formal program and project manager support, and they do a lot of the work collecting information and building out the strategy and meetings and group discussions. And that, as I mentioned, that's where I pushed my agenda forward a lot. Also, so I was just meeting with him earlier, and he says, all of our strategy and program are built around your group. I'm like, well, other people have to bring ideas, so it's become very, we call ourselves risk centric. But yeah, but that is the place that people go, and they do look at us as the, I guess, the strategic execution group for a lot of the activities that come through governance. As people mentioned, surveys and things like that too, information collected. One of the first things we did as part of the governance revamp was we executed the CAR capabilities model. And so we actually had an outside consulting company, help facilitate that because we're such a large institution and there were so many people involved in collecting that information. And then part of that, we also did a peer assessment with three peers outside the CAR capabilities model, just to measure where we were at and to help gauge, what we're doing well and what we could be doing better. So stuff like that too.
All right, so there actually is an interesting question in the chat. I hear spoken out loud and in the language used how an entrepreneur mindset can serve you well. Can you provide an example of when the standard business model serves you better? And how do you stay agile in a waterfall environment? Now, Craig Stewart already gave some answer about how the business model for just running the trains is of course very valuable. But I want the panel to sort of expand on this answer a little bit more and give your input. So anybody have something that comes to mind?
Yeah, I can jump up. I was actually going to ask if we can address this question. Again, coming from the perspective of PSC as a cyber infrastructure provider, We have had, especially departments at CMU, approach us and said, "Hey, we have used your infrastructure that's available to the national community. We are seeing such demand in our department that we need to build something for ourselves." They have actually gone out of their way to say, "We just want you to do it that way. Like, we want you to set it up. We want you to clone a very similar environment and use it for our department." This helps in just onboarding their students, their postdocs, anybody in their lab. But we're also seeing this as we move kind of beyond the big iron, where uh, I'd say the majority of PSC's funding comes from the National Science Foundation. An increasing portion of that funding is coming from the National Institutes of Health. So we're involved in a lot of large-scale data coordination projects where folks are generating sequencing data or microscopy data all across the country, sending it to PSC to be centrally stored. And a lot of our job is making sure that all the metadata specifications are met to the T. Directory structures are the exact same to make the data the most interoperable. We've seen a lot of success in going after some of these solicitations, um, but having some variance on the types of data that are being acquired, whether it's the modality or the assay type that's actually happening in the lab, or the overall goal of the funding agency. For example, two of the projects we have, one's called the Human Biomolecular Atlas Program. They're looking at healthy human tissue. There's another program from the NIH Common Fund called the senescent cell network. So cells that are starting the dying process. So a lot of what we saw in this opportunity was that we are building a lot of the infrastructure over here for these healthy cells, a lot of which can be used also over here. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel. We knew the staff members who would be responsible for each of these duties. This was kind of just a very easy decision and positions us well. So we didn't have to think outside the box on what's going to get us over the goal line here. It's what are we already doing that's incredibly valuable to this one program, start doing it for another.
Yeah, I would jump in and say one place where I think the standard business model really helps is in communication up through the university levels. Uh, the the BPFA that we report to is a standard business model person, and if you want to talk and have, you can't go in and say how wonderful your entrepreneurial endeavors are. You have to go in and show metrics. You have to go in and understand what they want to hear. To, maybe not to get new funding, but to continue old funding, that's very important.
Yeah, and actually, I think the big picture answer is that you need both, right? Because even a standard business has to have a strategic plan and has to have some investors and willing to take some risk, right? If you're just trying to balance the books, you're never going to grow and you're not going to survive. Then you're so you need to have both, and that's also what in my experience has been successful is to have a partnership with the faculty. You basically say, hey, you need to write grants, you need to pay something, but we're not going to ask you to cover all the costs. The university is in it too, and they are willing to invest, and so that allows you to come up with prices for the services that the faculty find reasonable, that fit in their grant budgets and whatever, and you still get the infrastructure available. It's not free, but it's also not at cost, and that is sort of a balance that is going to be different for different institutions, but that seems to be very solid for a sustainable program, because if you have that partnership and you then go to the administration and say, hey, we need to buy a new machine, but I have, this many millions in my budget from my business model, but I'm 2 million short. Will you, be a partner and contribute 2 million to the 6 million I already have or whatever? It's a much bigger or better conversation in general than when you go and ask every 5 years, I need another 8 million or whatever.
Yeah, I'll add to this. Yeah, I straddle this line quite a bit since I'm in central IT, and like I said, these programs and project managers are pushing like capacity planning and things on my group, and I'm just like, and we operate as a recharge center, and we're completely independent from the enterprise, except for the points where we interface with enterprise services, and it is a challenge. And I had my new bosses come in, and they want me to conform to the central IT methodologies for communication or outage notifications and things like that. And that I've kind of fought that we need to maintain some control and agility and flexibility. But at the same time, when you talk about like, hey, bringing in new things and new funding and change. You can't change too much. I mean, that's the big difference for me from supporting 50 researchers at an institute to now supporting 1,000 researchers, right? You can't change your services as quick. And then, you talk about staff turnover, with the pandemic, I lost a third of my staff, and then these new people coming in, they all thought they had ideas on solutions, but they really didn't have HPC experience. And so then there became a technology sort of struggle internally and who did what and making changes. So then you have to mature your organization to give the technology sort of design controls to architects versus the operational control to other people. So yeah, it's an evolution, and you're trying to find that balance depending on the size of your organization and how many hats you have and how many people you have to wear them.
Okay, any more comments on this particular question? If not, then we'll go on to the next question that was already touched on a little bit. How do you stay on top of technologies and emerging research trends? How has the emphasis on compliance data and security issues affected your planning and approach to RCD support? So I'm going to start from the bottom again. Craig Pohl.
Well, obviously, people mentioned supercomputing and per conferences, the CARC mailing list and meetings, CASC membership. That was, for me, all this was fairly new. I mean, most of the stuff I was doing was related to genomics prior to moving into central sort of computing, and no, all those resources have been great. And now, when we were first building, our services and getting them deployed, I was heavily involved into the technical aspects. But yeah, now I leverage my architects to really kind of go out there and stay on top of technology and bring that in and through, giving them opportunities to do mentorship and training and education.
Dan.
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of it is going out to conferences, talking to vendors, doing all those things, be involved in the national groups. I too would echo the idea that you really have to enable your team to be people who stay on top of, like reward that. Don't just say it's going to happen, but actually reward that because they're constantly out looking anyway, and it's good to have them reporting it back to you. The other thing that's really changed is how much we involve ourselves with the CISO rather than trying to run, on our own. That's a really important relationship. So I would say that's one of the big ways that it changes our data planning uh, is involving the security office.
Evan.
Yeah, I echo many of the same points for staying in touch with what's going on. I think I'm to follow on Craig's comment about his architects going out to the same for me. I'm not able to stay as in touch as I used to be on technology, but fortunately we have some people that are really closely following what's going on there. And but I want to also echo what Dan was saying about the CISO and staying really engaged with our security team here at the institution. And because we go through our state networking provider, it's really part of our state higher ed regents called OneNet. And so they also help with that as well. But we really partner very closely with both of those groups on networking and security both.
Stephen.
Yeah, I'll say from my specific role and function, it is not necessarily my job to stay on top of the technologies. Again, leaning on our team. I'm going to go off of what Dan said, not necessarily incentivizing, but encouraging the staff who are interested in what they do to come to meetings and come with ideas based on what they've been seeing that works in other places, could be even be across sector. Some of the trends that we're seeing, I think I speak for a lot of people, where more of the conversation is shifting toward data, in terms of protecting data, in terms of preserving data. I talked a little bit about metadata structures, directory structures. There's more and more conversation happening there, and it hits every field of science. So internally, we've been dealing and grappling with a lot of similar things that other centers have been, and like the campus champions mailing list. I feel like every other week there is a question about NIST 800-171, and more people are interested in that. And figuring out and having discussions with our security people about how do we start down this path? How do we have a proof of concept here and grow it? When we're an organization that stands up roughly 20 different pieces of cyber infrastructure, we can't do it all at once, but figuring out, what is most important right now. A lot of this relates back to the NIH projects that I was mentioning, but then figuring out where do we go next with it. Where's the next emerging need from the folks that we serve?
Greg Stewart.
So let me maybe start with a different take on research trends. I think one of the most useful things that I ever did in conversations with faculty members was find really, really good discipline scientists, people not, everybody but computer scientists, and ask them what it was that they really wanted to do and couldn't do. And that very often uh, provided the impetus for a new system architecture, or at least new system configuration, new software programs, the original data capacitor, the now eons old Avid cluster, were very much built as solutions to discipline specific problems. And I think you can find out a lot about building good cyber infrastructure by talking to really, really top people. Like Franco Pistilli's BrainLife.io is now the standard platform for any sort of brain imaging work. And that really started as a result of a conversation between one of my staff members and Franco when he was still at IU. In terms of data that comes with stipulations around it, we had a lucky coincidence at Indiana University. First, we had grant money from the Lilly Endowment for something called the Indiana Genomics Initiative, which was intended to bring the School of Medicine into the 21st century with genomic medicine. And that gave us a fair bit of money for what was the original Big Red supercomputer. And we signed up to run a data repository for a medical project that involved pictures of underage patients, which are impossible to de-identify. And so between pressure to make our systems more easily available to medical students and the fact that we had a whole bunch of signatures on a document that said we were going to do something we couldn't do without HIPAA compliance, I simply said in 2005 several words that ended in it. And then I said, we're just going to make everything we have compliant with HIPAA. And that was, at that time, a huge benefit and a real competitive advantage for us. And I think while the details have changed. I think the fact remains that you can take ability to handle really difficult and stringent requirements into a competitive advantage if you can do things better than your peers. I think Barali at the University of Chicago is an example of that, where he just handles sensitive data compliance as quickly and about as well as anybody. I think that covers everything I've got to say on that.
All right. So the next question, what percentage of your staff are soft funded? How does the funding affect the programs and consistency by which you deliver your support to researchers? Stephen, why don't you start?
I think the number is probably around 95%. In terms of affecting the programs and consistencies, I haven't seen, I would say staff turnover is probably a bigger issue in terms of affecting our programming than anything. Um, yeah, this is a tough question other than giving you the percentage that we work within. Again, a lot of the projects that we operate, these are our first supercomputer was 1986, and back then one proposal funded the whole center. Certainly things are very different now, but a lot of the things that we have baked in our strategic plan and that we take into our weekly, bi-weekly meetings with like an emphasis on cross training, an emphasis on pairing a junior staff member up with a more senior staff member to show them a little bit more about what goes on in every project so that when we do inevitably go through some staff turnover, we're a little bit quicker to ramp back up. I don't think it's necessarily the nature of the soft funding that affects that. I think it's that if you are constantly operating in this environment, you have to operate in this manner that if in the summertime, I think is perfect in academia where a lot of folks are out sometimes for long periods of time. The weather has been increasingly more and more extreme. We've seen a lot of issues at our own data center. But we have had, especially on the system side, the data center side, we have had some new blood come in and immediately jump in. They know where the manuals are to address some of these issues. And even after talking to some more of our system staff, it's like sometimes it's not just finding the documentation, it's being able to work through a problem and think critically about, which component to start with first. So, I don't think it's necessarily the nature of the soft funding. I think it's just being an organization that is aware of how much of your staff is funded that way and being agile to the point where you have some backups to continue operations and have it not affect, your stakeholders.
All right. Next, Craig Pohl, why don't you chime in on that question?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're a research center, and we don't have any direct grant fund, but so we do charge grants, and that's about 50% of our revenue comes from grants. And so since it's fairly spread out, we haven't had any impacts, and since our group's fairly new, we've been growing, as I mentioned. But we are getting to the point where the government's potential change in indirect rates and just feeling like maybe we're getting to a point where we need to figure out some kind of new cost models and some new ways of sustainability going forward. So those are concerns on the horizon and things we're thinking about. How do we change to adapt depending upon where the future holds? And then, providing consistency services, as I mentioned, partly of growing too fast or having staff leave, as Stephen mentioned, it's sort of an operational thing. You got to cross-train people. I mean, ultimately, it kind of goes back to some of what I mentioned too before is about like you can't change your services. Services have to be fairly fixed and well known so your researchers know what they're dealing with. It then gets into, those custom requests or support needs that, and then things just take longer. And most of the time, I find that researchers are fairly understandable if you set expectations, so if you let them know, like, hey, we heard your request, but we're just too busy right now. We can't get to it. People are understandable, and so yeah, so it could definitely be a challenge at times, and but I mean, it gets into that sort of business model. That's why I say our first priority is operations, right? Is just maintaining our current operations. Everything else is added value, and that means, helping researchers with custom projects or other new projects that we may have.
Uh, Next, Dan.
Yeah, I've actually been pretty lucky at both the institutions I've done this. I've had hard funding for all my staff members, even research facilitators. Now they are expected to help repay their funding by being on grants, uh, but we haven't had to deal with the actual staff levels varying based on what's happening in research, uh, which is a huge benefit.
Evan.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that we had started with some soft funding for a part of an FTE for our system administrator, but we were able to turn that into a full-time hard funded position at some point, pretty recently, really the last few years. And so we kind of, we have a system administrator, we've got a faculty tech liaison, an assistant dean, a brand new assistant dean that's helping with what I used to do, which was more on the research facilitation end. And then I guess I'm trying to help fill in around the edges here and there. But we are about to hire another person that will be dedicated to at least part-time. And it's kind of quasi soft funded, but it's not from a grant. It's more from a state funding initiative for workforce development to really focus on engineering computational work in particular. And so that one will be sort of a new thing, but you can probably hear from my description, we're kind of building up. And so generally that's helping with our consistency and supporting researchers. But I will say the turnover, when you're smaller, especially, I think one position leaving and having a gap in that position is really devastating to some extent, because you could be left without really anyone to do something for a time. And we did have that happen, and that certainly affected our consistency of support. So we're trying to hopefully build up enough robustness in the team that with cross training and size of the team as well, so that becomes less of an issue in the future.
All right, Craig Stewart.
So everybody's been very polite, and nobody has mentioned the fact that we are living in the middle of a concerted assault on science as we know it. And I will say that I consider myself fairly lucky in terms of my personal happiness that I got off this ride before I had to deal with some of the things that have gone on this year. But still, what we did might be relevant. So we had 40% of, give or take, a total of almost 200 people soft funded. I used to have this picture showing one guy riding two different horses, one foot on one saddle, one foot on the other. And what I always said was the horse of federal funding is the one that you want to pay attention to, you instinctively pay attention to, because that's the one you worry about falling out underneath you. But the horse of institutional funding is the foundation of your operation. And so what we always tried to do was be very, very careful that our critical local research services were base funded or funded through sort of state competitiveness grants. And then we experimented and provided national funding at the national level with federal funding. We had a very sweet deal on F&A. We got back 50% of our F&A. So we hoarded some of that against tough times. We kept a very careful map of whose funding ran out when. And we had a lot of diversification in terms of having staff from PTI funded on discipline-specific grants with disciplinary people. And that enabled us to have very, very few incidents where we had any grant-generated service discontinuity. And I think those strategies would be helpful in mitigating things that are going on today. But boy, we are in a national situation relative to science that is not it is without precedent in our lifetimes, and how to adapt to it is something I wish everybody well with.
Thank you. So the last question is a little bit more open-ended. Can you please talk about a significant program development in your group and how it came about? So I want people to tell stories, and we still have a little bit of time, but not that much. So who has a fun story to tell, and they can get started?
I have a good one about Jetstream.
Okay.
So Jetstream came about as a result of a version of the HPC funding call, which very specifically said we want different things. And I had, well before this call came out, planned a hunting trip with my dad out west. And I had an idea that I had fleshed out very carefully and given to my staff. I went off and said, I want you all to think about this. I went off, came back and had a meeting with everybody the Monday after I got back from my hunting trip. And my staff said, that's really a terrible idea. Here's a good one. And that became Ralph Roskis and I wrote each other's letters of support that year. and we were the two winners. Bridges and Jetstream were the two funded exceed resources that year.
Well,
Yeah,
with
that's an interesting.
the mention of PSC, I guess I'm next.
Yes.
This is, I guess, a fun story. I had a researcher come to me one day and said, "Hey, we need these GPUs. We can't plug them in our office anymore. We were told to come to you guys." It's like, okay. And I told them how much it was going to be. And they're like, well, what do you mean? We just need you to operate them for us. I'm like, okay. So I gave them the laundry list of what encompasses that. And they're like, okay, this is cost prohibitive. And I used to live a couple miles from the office. And I'm on the bus one morning checking my email, and I get this link to a federal funding solicitation. It says, hey, we're going to write a response to this and we're going to put it in PSC's machine room. I'm like, sure, I'm in as long as I get approval from my boss. And when we're looking at the budget, I'm like, $500,000 does not buy you a lot of GPUs. Like, how can we intermingle this with another resource? We have other resources in the machine room. They have open ports on the network for IB connections. Have a file system you can leverage. The system software would be leveraged. So we basically wrote the proposal to the agency and without actually saying you would be silly to not fund this because you're already getting all of this for free and it's already been paid for by another agency. We got it awarded. We stood it up. Everybody that I talked to at the center, I was met with, "We have never done this before, and you have no idea what you're doing and how this is going to go." And just this past year, the department that we're doing this for, they found enough money to buy double the amount of hardware that they initially got through a federal sponsor, that they have seen this return on investment within their group, and they have now been a big advocate for us at Carnegie Mellon, saying that like without PSC, none of this would have started, we wouldn't have had these grant papers, wouldn't have had anything like actually turn out about this. But it started very cheekily, and I'm like, hey, let's see what happens. What's the worst case? We can't do it. And here we are, 2 years into the collaboration.
All right. Those are two fun stories to get started. Well, I need to ask our great fearless leader, Henry, if I'm correct, we have 1 more minute left. Is that true?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right. Does anybody have a parting statement of encouragement for our audience?
I'll take a shot at that. I think you probably heard a lot from some of the panelists about risk taking on their campuses or at their institutions, and I think we probably all have some of that spirit. Even so I've been involved in curriculum development too. That also can take on some risk taking attributes too. So don't be afraid to fail and at grants or starting something up internally at all, because it's going to take iterations typically to get something to fly that you just heard from Stephen about that, right? That you don't know it's going to work, but give it a shot and build up. No matter kind of start where you are from there and try to build up from that. So.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for this panel. I think this was very, very good. We covered a broad thing, but it's good advice for the next generation to get ready for leadership roles in RCD. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Eric.
And thank you all. And let's have a virtual round of applause for our strategic thinking and visioning. Oh, look at that. Now they can actually do that in real life. uh, So
Pretty
our
cool.
panel, and that's just terrific, and so much, not just useful information, but wisdom, which in my experience, wisdom is more valuable than knowledge, and knowledge is more valuable than information. Thank you, and a quick preview of coming attractions. We'll take a break. We're gonna come back at quarter till the hour for our next panel, which is recruiting and retaining computing and data intensive researchers. So this is how you find your users. So thank you, everyone. We'll keep the session open. I will stop the recording. So you're welcome to stay logged in. And we'll see you in about 27 minutes.